How's everybody doing? So I get the honor of keeping you from rushing to the airport and keeping these guys from packing up their stuff. So forgive me for that. So if you are of a certain age, you may not know me as a podcaster or as a writer, but the guitar player for the band Genesis. Couple things. One, I did not have this photo on hand. I had to search for it. Two, hashtag sideburns. It's just a really bad scene over there. He gets all the best SEO. He has the Wikipedia page. It's a real pain in the butt. I've been covering Apple since 2008. In 2006 or so, I was in college and I needed some extra income. And so I got a job in my local Apple store, like many young nerds do. I was full of hope and joy, and it was crushed out of me at Apple Retail. I was a Mac genius for 2 years. I led the Genius program in Memphis as well as in Nashville for a little while, and left Apple in 2008. So I survived the first 2 iPhone launches. That tells you how irrelevant all of this is now. And when I left Apple, I went to go join a Apple authorized service provider. I'm going to talk about that company again in a little while. But more importantly, at the same time, I started blogging. So I launched my website, 512pixels.net, in 2008, getting ready to turn 8 years old. Actually, it just did a couple weeks ago. And my goal was to write about Apple and write about this ecosystem, which of course was much smaller then, but through the lens of retail, taking my experience of being on the inside and understanding especially what was going on with the Mac at the time and writing about it. And like many of you, that old work is a little painful to look at. Please don't look through my archives, right? It's like seeing an old version of your app or service, and you're just like, what was I thinking? There's linen everywhere. Same thing in writing. In 2010, I met Mike Hurley, young, bearded British man who I'm now in business with. And he had a podcast at the time with another gentleman from London, and they were talking about tech. And they invited me to come talk about the iPad. And Mike and I really hit it off, and we kept doing some projects, and the rest is the history we're getting ready to go through. So today I still write. 512 Pixels is still part of what I do for a living. It really has an emphasis on Apple history now. Looking back at Apple, I'm a firm believer that we can't understand where we are or where we're going without knowing where we've been. Last year at this very conference, Greg gave me a Newton as a gift. There's a picture of it, I think, on the Release Notes site still. Recently, I set out on a project to collect every color of iMac G3. And I'm really happy just to stop the talk here and answer any questions about why Apple sold a computer that was covered in a flower power design. But Charles said I couldn't do that, so we'll keep going. More recently, something I wrote ended up on the NBC Nightly News and Good Morning America. My grandmother saw the story and called my mom wondering to know if it was the same Stephen Hackett, and it was. I had a story up where my first iPhone 7 was defective and made a hissing noise. I put it on YouTube, not really thinking much about it, wrote a little blog post, and that video has gotten 1.5 million views in the 8 days since. Not what I expected, but something that I've dealt with the last couple weeks. But this writing and YouTube and collecting, they're passion projects. 512 Pixels doesn't pay my bills. It pays for itself, and it pays for an iMac G3 every once in a while, but that's really about it. So I'm going to talk about my job. In 2014, I co-founded Relay FM, a podcast network that some of you were on. We've had 2 hosts speak here, both Christina and David are hosts on the network. We represent 22 shows. We have 30 hosts around the world. We have hosts across America, Australia, Europe, Italy, wherever that is. I don't even know where that is on the map. And we're approaching 2 million downloads a month across the network. We have sponsors from all over the country. Some of you have sponsored our shows and the network, so thank you for that. And Relay has a really simple marching order. We set out to obsessively cover nerdy topics. That's it. Talk about things that are nerdy, with people who are nerdy about them. We cover everything from Apple to Android, design to development, fountain pens, yes, really, space, and everything in between. Our goal is to create a place where people who are passionate about something or who are nerdy about something can come and create content about that. Podcasting has a tech overhead. It's just part of the deal. And so we have hosts who, very few of them work full-time on these types of projects. Most of them have jobs, but they sit down and record once a week or a couple of times a month to talk about something they're excited about. And we can give them the infrastructure and the support and make them some money, and they can do what they love. And that's really exciting to give people the tools to equip them to do that sort of thing. I currently host 3 shows. You can see we have some continuity in our art, which is important. The first is Connected, which I host with Mike and Federico Vitici of Mac Stories. We talk about Apple and the ecosystem that it has created. It's a weekly show. Connected, I think, is unique that we have 3 accents on the show. We have me, I'm from Tennessee. We have Mike from London, and we have Federico from Rome. Time zones are really difficult when you have a show with people spanning 7 hours. But it's something we've done for many years, and we're really proud of. Liftoff is a show that I talk with Jason Snell twice a month about space. So we cover NASA, the European Space Agency, SpaceX. They keep blowing up rockets, so it keeps giving us good episodes. Sorry, Elon. And we get to play with different formats. We do explainers on the show, so we take a topic like how the sun works, or weird outer solar system moons, which there are many, and get to do something educational with them. So it's a lot of fun to break out of tech. Liftoff was the first show we really did that broke out of consumer technology, and we're doing more and more of that now. And the last show is Ungeniused, where Mike and I talk about weird Wikipedia articles. It's actually the first show Mike and I ever did together in 2011. The first version is so bad, it has been banished from the internet. 5 years has been really good for our skills. So we talk about things like the hum, which is this phenomenon where people hear a low-pitched noise and it drives them mad. Some people have actually killed themselves to avoid the sound. There's lots of questions as if that's actually a real thing, super creepy to research and read about. And more recently, we did the Principality of Sealand, which is my personal favorite episode so far. The TLDR, some guys took over a Navy base off the coast of England in like the 70s and declared it a country. Spoiler alert, if you say you're a country, doesn't make you a country. So life is great with a good co-founder. I know a lot of you are truly independent where it's just you and your MacBook Pro, but a lot of you have partners in your business. Maybe it's a co-founder, maybe it's someone who you hired who is now on the executive team. But Mike and I's relationship, I think, is a really good one. And you can hear his talk last year. Like Charles said, it's on the website. You should go listen to it. It's way better than this talk, honestly. Plus, his accent is way cooler than mine. About 3 months after launching Relay publicly in August of 2014, Mike quit his job. And it was a little unexpected. And it was a little scary. But what we got immediately was a huge surge in productivity and growth. The time that he was putting into the business had immediate ramifications, and they were positive. But we knew right from the get-go that we needed to be careful and we needed to be purposeful about how we divided our tasks and how we focused on what needed to be done within the business. And so we looked at what we were good at. We looked at our strengths. And we came up with some clear definitions and some clear boundaries of what was his and what was mine. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So our shows are sponsor-based. Like I'm sure you know, you hear David Sparks read an ad for 1Password on Mac Power Users. That's how Mac Power Users gets made. David's looking at me now. Hey, buddy. I'm really self-conscious all of a sudden. So Mike sells most of those ads. And we set that up because Mike, frankly, is a better people person than I am. He's better at understanding what people want in a conversation. He's just better with people. I'm better at logistics and details. I'm the spreadsheet guy in the business. Ladies. Sorry. And so Mike will sell the ad, and then it will come to me to make sure that the data is all entered in the systems correctly, to make sure that we get paid on time, to make sure that we pay our hosts on time. So Mike is sort of the forward-looking, outward face of the company, and I'm kind of taking care of the stuff behind the scenes. And we do that because it plays to our strengths. We could do it a different way, but it would be a struggle. We do the same thing internally. Mike and I both have the honor of working with our hosts and developing new shows. But when it comes to inter-host relationship stuff, Mike's better at it than I am, so Mike handles it. When it comes to the tech stuff, so we have a website, it's a custom CMS, custom Ruby app, rest in peace, me. When it comes to our design, when it comes to our CDN and our caching, all that stuff falls to me because that's my background in IT, and that's where I am better able to serve the company. So we were 3 months in, Mike had quit his job, but I couldn't yet. I was the director of accounts at a large web design and development agency in Memphis where I live. And while it was really good that Mike quit his job before I did, it was also really stressful and it was really hard. All of a sudden, we would have hang-ups. Mike would need something from me, but I would be at my job, right? I would be taking care of a client or in a meeting with my boss or on a conference call, and I couldn't handle what Mike needed me to do. And the inverse would happen. Mike is 6 hours away from me, and he would need something from me or I would need something from him once I got home at night, and he'd already be asleep. So we'd wake up to a bunch of iMessages and emails from each other. In fact, this relationship is where the name Relay comes from. It's the idea that we pass off the company between us. And it was really hard. And the way that I solved it was that I became a thief. I stole time from everyone. So I would be at work, the company that was paying me good money, paying my mortgage, keeping food on my table, and I would steal time from them to work on my side project. I would sneak off to the break room, or later when I didn't care so much, I would just do it at my desk. And that was wrong. And it was something that I knew was the wrong decision, but I didn't have any way around it. And I was really worried that the energy and the time that I was putting into Relay, that I was putting into this passion project, this company we built with our own hands and with our own savings, wasn't ever going to pan out, that it wasn't ever going to be truly worth it. But then the spring of 2015 happened. It's kind of hard to read because I took that picture while driving. Sorry, Mom. It says, if not now, when? So I'd had a really bad day at work. I had a huge client meeting that I was late to because I left the headlights on in my car and the battery of the car died in the parking garage. So I had to deal with that. I was rushing to this big meeting I wasn't prepared for. I was late. So I cut through town. There's a shortcut to get to this client meeting. And I saw this church sign. It was the road that I rarely drive down in Memphis. And this church sign didn't make me quit my job. Like, that'd be admittedly ridiculous. But what it did do was it put a hot coal in my mind. And I kept coming to this question. I kept turning it over and thinking about it. And I was realizing that the ducks were lining up in a row. By the spring of 2015, Relay was profitable enough that I was making, as an owner, what I was making at my job. Paychecks were the same. And I realized that my to-do list at Relay was enough to justify the time. And things were beginning to line up to make the jump. And I realized that it may be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We're all really fortunate here that we've been at that crossroads to make the leap into our own businesses. But for each one of us here, there are hundreds or maybe even thousands of developers or designers or content creators who don't ever make it to that crossroads, whose ideas or businesses never get as far as the option to go full-time. And so on July 6th, 2015, I announced that I was going independent. So that's a little over a year ago. I actually left my job in August. So I want to talk about the State of the Union. And the State of the Union, to borrow a phrase from Barack Obama, is strong. Relay is profitable. Relay is growing. It's been a big success. I'm paying my bills. My kids have food on the table. And I'm living the dream in a lot of ways. I get to create things. I get to make things and craft things. Granted, they're MP3s, but whatever. Making things and putting them into the world. And I get to do it with people who I genuinely love and care about. The family at Relay is something that I do not take for granted. But not everything is perfect. And there were some things in the last year that came up that I wasn't expecting. It's been an amazing year, but in a lot of ways it's been the hardest year I've ever lived through. There were lots of adjustments to make across life. When you leave your job, not just work gets affected. Every part of your life has to change. And I had some misconceptions about it. I'm friends with all you people. Like, I know the independent lifestyle. It wasn't going to be a surprise to me. Yet I was shockingly naive about some things. And some of the things I'm going to talk about really caught me off guard. So these misconceptions, I thought were going to be fact. I thought I'd quit my job and A, B, and C would be true from day one. And I'm not saying that can't happen, but I had to work for them. And then some of them I'm still working towards. This is the first one. You'll see your family more. I think family is a big reason a lot of people choose to go indie. I know it is for me. I'm married and I have three young kids. And I was not content to watch them grow up from afar. So I'd see them in the morning. I'd go to work. They would do their thing. And I would see them in the evening. And then when Relay came around, I was working every night, so I didn't even see them then. And I realized that my kids were going through phases of life that I wasn't even a part of some days. And that wasn't how I wanted our family life to be. Any parent will tell you all time with your children is precious. If you don't have kids, you know this about your significant other or another family member, that time speeds up as you get older. It's a terrible trick of nature. I feel this really acutely. Some of you who followed me may know that our oldest son, when he was 6 months of age, was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And it was really bad and it was really scary. He's now almost 8 years old. His birthday's in a couple weeks. He's getting Legos, don't tell him. Lego, excuse me, John Syracuse. No S. But our time with him is not guaranteed. And of course, the truth is no one's tomorrow is promised to us. But I feel that really acutely when you have a child with a catastrophic disease. And as good as he is doing, he's never going to be out of the woods. And his cancer is something my family will always live with. And I always feel guilty when I have to take time away from family because I don't know how many days of those are left with my healthy kids or my oldest son. So something I do to combat this is to be intentional. And this may sound cold or robotic, but the way that I do it is that I schedule family time. My wife and I have a calendar named Family Events. It's purple in my iCloud account. And purple events don't get touched. If something goes in that calendar, the red from work or blue from personal calendars can't override it. The purple is special. And it's something that, like I said, it may sound cold, but it's something that I have to do. I need that intentionality in my life. Number 2, you'll work less. You notice these colors get darker as we go. Just wait, it gets real depressing in a minute. So I was naive. I thought that I'd quit my job at the agency, take it out, and I'd pick up Relay and I would put it in that 9 to 5 slot. Those of you who work for yourself know that is a foolish idea. If you run an app or a service, you may have the same problem I do, where my web server only explodes when I'm eating dinner. Somehow Heroku knows that we're having dinner at my house, and then our app explodes and I have to deal with it. There's also the idea that if I don't do it, no one will do it. So even though I have a co-founder, he doesn't live in America, and we're an American business. So if I don't go to the bank, or I don't go to the P.O. box, or I don't pay the taxes, they don't get done. And those things have real ramifications, my lawyer has told me. So we want to make sure they get done. We also had a backlog of work to do when I quit my job. The most public example of that is our membership program, where you can go online and you can say, hey, I love Mac Power users, and I want to pay $5 a month, and Mac Power users get that money. And we wanted to do that months before we did it. But it was something, I'm the logistics guy. It had tech, it had spreadsheets, it's my job. And I couldn't get to it. I couldn't do it when I had a job. And so when August rolled around and I was suddenly working at home every day on Relay, I jumped into that project and we got it launched in December. But I also took on all the other backlog projects at once. And I did way too much. And I was working more than I was when I had a job and I had Relay. And that was not great. I had this fear. I had this fear that if I let off the gas at all, if I couldn't keep the air moving over the wings fast enough, I would just crash out of the sky. And I felt guilty about taking time off. And I had the fear that I didn't know how fast I needed to move to stay aloft. And it's taken time to it's taken time to be aware of what that number actually is. And it's not 80 hours a week. Some weeks it's 60, some weeks it's 40. But it's something that I try to be aware of now. You'll be less stressed. Let's talk about that Apple service provider that I joined. It was a consulting firm. They did a bunch of stuff. They had about 80 employees when I showed up, and I was tasked with starting the Apple business. And our business model was really pretty simple. We had a walk-in repair business. So if you smashed your iBook, I could fix it. But the real money came from contracts with Apple. So say that you're a school district. Say, hi, I'm a school district. Congratulations. And you bought 150 iMacs. In that contract, Apple would say to education customers, there's going to be a company that comes in and images them, inventories them, and installs them for you. Because a lot of school districts don't have the manpower to do that sort of job. And so Apple hired us all across the state of Texas to do this. And we did it for almost 2 years. But we started in 2008. And if you remember anything from history class, 2008 was a really bad time to start a company that required public money, because all of our customers were K through 12 school districts, and all the money ran out. And there were some other factors in the business as well, including the death of the owner. And all of a sudden, the business that I had joined, I left Apple, a secure job, to a company of 80 people, and then it was 20, and then it was 8, then it was 4, and eventually it was 0. The company I had joined was failing out of my control. Now, the decisions that doomed that company some of them were made years before I showed up. But I felt really helpless. I've never been more stressed in a job because the company I was in was literally crumbling and I was trying to find something else. But the truth is, when you're independent, that fate is in your own hands and you realize how fragile it can be when there's no one else around. You feel like there's no safety net. Now, the truth is, if you work for a company, your safety net is only as good as theirs is, but that's a story for a different time. It takes time to trust your business, and it takes time to trust the processes you've put in place. And frankly, it takes time to trust yourself, knowing that the structure you have built in your business is sustainable and is something that you don't have to worry about every single day. You'll have more freedom. I don't think there's a brochure, but if there was a brochure about being independent, this would be on the cover of it, right? No boss. Can do what I want. There's no man telling me what to do. I think freedom means different things to different people, though. So some examples. For me, it means some days I take my kids to school, or that I walk the dog in the afternoon. Maybe I have a surprise lunch with my spouse. Maybe for you, it means you can take your laptop, like Greg was talking about, and go to the coffee shop to answer service tickets, or hit the button and do a standing desk and do something else. The freedom to change your environment and change your context for the work you do. Something you can't do if you're stuck to a cubicle all day. It's a big plus of independent life. For me, it means working different times. And so something I know about myself is that I'm most creative and most useful between about 5 and 10 p.m. That's kind of my butter zone for work. And as much as it drives my wife crazy, sometimes I need to work those hours because I just need to be in that zone. And so I have the freedom to shift things around. If I have errands to run or something comes up, I can do it in the morning and then work in the evening. But freedom can be dangerous, right? If you're tinkering and changing things, and that's what nerds like to do, like nerds are tinkerers by nature, you can actually create distractions. And I spent a lot of time the last year goofing around with stuff instead of actually working. So for me, this takes the form of how my desk looks. Changing something in my software stack, changing out a monitor, randomly changing my backup strategy for the 3rd time in a year. And instead of those choices and that freedom being beneficial to me and my company, they're just wasting time. I would encourage you to only tinker with things that need to be tinkered with. If you have a system in place that's working and that you trust, leave it alone. Just because you can change something or you can tinker with something because you have the freedom to do it, doesn't mean it's a good idea. There's a time for that. There's also a time to buckle down and work. That's a lesson I had to learn. This one's black, so you know it's serious. So if you take your side project, you take your app you've been working on nights and weekends, you take your podcast network that you started and make it a business, surely making that a full-time thing will be fulfilling, right? If I get X amount of joy out of this work, and I do it full-time, that amount of joy should go up. That's not necessarily true. There's no manual for that. There's not even a ratio that works in my mind. Because here's the truth. No job can change who you are. It just can't. Things that annoy you in your 9-to-5 job will annoy you in independent life. The bad habits that I picked up as a manager in previous jobs have chased me into my relationship with my co-founder. The way that I thought about work then is the way I think about work now. The way that I respond to bad news then is the way I respond to bad news now. My nature, and job can't change that. So this is something that really hit me the beginning of this year. So I'd been independent 5 or 6 months. I came through the holidays, had to explain to all my in-laws what a podcast network was. Didn't go very well. I still think my in-laws think that I'm involved in some sort of pyramid scheme. I was living the dream, right? I was making things that I wanted to make. I was being creative. My business was successful, but I wasn't happy. In fact, I was the opposite of happy. I had all these good things, but I felt like crap. Now, I know about myself that I have seasons of depression in my life. I had one in college that was really bad. I had one about 6 years ago, and I had one at the beginning of this year. And unlike the previous two, I was in denial about it this time. Because I'm living the dream, right? I have all this freedom. There's no boss telling me what to do. I'm making what I want to make. I'm making good money. My family is secure. But I still felt like crap. And it took time to work through that. And what I came back to was that simple truth that a job can't change who we are. That as great as Relay is, it can't solve the flaws I have within me as a human being. No job can. And so I had to ask for help. And I would encourage you that if that's where you are, or if you've been there in the past, to ask for help. If you're in Memphis, I have a really good guy you can talk to. But talk to your spouse. Talk to a sibling. Talk to a parent. Talk to a neighbor. Talk to somebody. Because the truth of the matter is, our health, and especially our mental health, far more important than getting X thing shipped. If it comes down to getting something out the door and really beating yourself up over it, evaluate that, because it's probably not worth it. I'm feeling much better now. But it is time to make some adjustments. I'm a year in, struggled with some things. I've had some wins, I've had some losses. And it's time to revisit, and it's time to adjust. So I'm doing some really concrete things in my second year of independent life. The first one is looking at quarterly goals. You didn't see that coming, right? We all quit our jobs, so we don't have to do that sort of BS. Quarterly goals. I like them for 2 reasons. One, they allow me to space out my work. So in June, some of you were there at WWDC, we did a live event. And it took me about 3 months of planning to do a 3-hour event. So God bless you guys for doing this. That's multi-days. It was a lot of work. So I knew that it was going to be in June, even though Apple doesn't tell you the event until way too late. So I knew that February or March, I needed to start the process of planning our event, finding space, thinking if we're going to do a caterer, finding an AV guy, planning it all out. But what that allowed me to do was not worry about it until February or March. So when I was in November, December, January, I didn't have to start working on WWDC yet. It gave me the freedom and the pacing that I needed to put that project off until it was time. Quarterly goals were great in reverse as well. You get to the end of the year or the end of a quarter, and you haven't met any of them. That's worth some reflection. Maybe the goals were too ambitious. We've done that. It's like, hey, we're going to ship this thing, and you realize it's way more work than it was. And maybe you needed to reevaluate your timeline. Or maybe there's something more sinister at play. Maybe the goals you put out aren't working because you have some problem in your business that you need to deal with. It's a great line in the sand that you can go back and look at. I'm also working on relying on a personal board of advisors. That's kind of a goofy term that I heard probably at a TED Talk, but I'm stealing it for this. And this is a group of people in my life that I can talk to about my business, about my work, who have nothing to do with my business or work. It's not that I'm hiding things from my co-founder. He knows everything about me. But it's having another set of inputs. Having people that I trust in my life that I can say, hey, I'm working too much, or hey, I'm really stressed, or back in January, hey, I'm falling apart. I need to talk to somebody about it. And that's really hard, and it can be really humbling to go to somebody and saying it's not working. But it's also great when things are working, to have somebody to celebrate the victories with. And so for me, this is a group of guys who I've known for a long time in Memphis, and it's people whose advice that I trust and whose input I value. And I know that they don't know the ins and outs of what a podcast network does, but they know me, and they know the type of work that I do. A couple more things. I'm going to be working out of a new space. So how many of you actually work from your home? Kind of what I figured, most of us. So I work out of a spare bedroom. Before we moved, I worked out of our master bedroom, like a desk next to our bed, which is really terrible. And it was terrible for a bunch of reasons, but the primary one is that it blended work and non-work too much. That it was confusing for my kids when I was at work and when I wasn't. It was confusing to me, honestly, because I would just go to my desk and do something not work-related and then end up working for 3 hours and then it's midnight. So I'm building some space now that is in the backyard, a standalone building. So if I go and lock the door at night, I'm going to leave work out back. And that's going to take a lot of discipline on my part, and I'm probably going to screw it up for a while. But I'm hoping that I can start to build some of those walls that I haven't had in my first year of dividing work and non-work time and space. Within Relay, Mike and I are looking at bringing on an assistant for the first time. So up until now, including today, Mike and I do all of our own admin work. We book all the ads ourselves, we put everything in the system ourselves, all the ad reads, all the copy, all the invoicing, all the reminding people of their invoices, and it's a lot of work. And it's work that, as we get bigger, someone else can take on. That's not the most valuable use of our time. Some of that stuff is really just basically data entry. And so we are looking at what that means. What sort of jobs are we willing to hand over to somebody else? And it's really scary to think about, right? Because I have my process and I have my spreadsheets and I have my way of doing things. But it's time to bring another set of hands into the mix to get some of this work done. And it's going to give us more time to work on the creative sides of the business, and it's going to give us more time off. Shocking. And finally, I'm working at being better at saying no. A year ago, I was working on Relay and I was working on 512, but I was also doing some consulting locally. And I took on some jobs I had no business doing. I took on one job that was way too big and I had to bow out of. I took some jobs that were way too small and not worth the time and energy. So I'm trying to better understand the impact of this other work. We all have side work from our independent businesses. And understanding the impact of that beyond the financial is super important. Because when you're stressed and you're working too much, like you're doing other freelance work you don't have to do, that's an easy way to solve those problems. The last one, see, it's white, so we leave on a happy note. The biggest adjustment I'm making for the second year, and what I want to leave you with as we all go home, is to remember how fortunate we all are. Like I said, there are tons of people out there whose businesses or apps or services or content never got them as far as we've gotten. The fact that we're in this room, that we're at a fancy conference about independent work, is an amazing blessing. And there's a whole bunch of things that go into that, right? So for a lot of us, it's working our rear ends off way too much. Sometimes there's luck involved, that you have an app or you have an idea that hits just at the right time, like my Hackett video. Sometimes it means that you made a smart decision years ago that pay off now, and all of a sudden something you've been working on just comes to the next level. However we got there, we're here today, and we should be fortunate, and we should be thankful to the people in our lives who support us in doing this. That's not to be boastful in ourselves. It's not to be boastful in saying, look at what I have done, look what my co-founder and I have made. but it's an opportunity to be thankful for what we have due to others. So for me, that means the 30 people that are on Relay who host shows, being thankful for each and every one of them. Because without them, I don't have a network. Without any shows, it doesn't matter if I show up every day. If you have an app, it's being thankful and, like we've spoken about so much this week, being good to our customers and to our clients. Because if people aren't downloading the app, if they're not hitting the in-app purchase, or they're not hiring you for contract work, there's literally no point in being here, because we should all be looking for jobs. So when I think about my last year, about some of the struggles and some of the wins, this is the thread that I keep coming back to. That when I feel stressed, or when I find myself working too much, or if I'm frustrated that I'm not seeing my family the amount of time that I want to, or I just feel down, this is what I'm going to come back to. An attitude of thankfulness and gratitude for what we get to do, because it truly is special. My favorite thing about conferences like this is asking people what they do. And part of that, I think maybe because I'm from the South, you ask what football team people like. I don't have an answer for that, so I just go to, what do you do? And I love it because you get to hear someone's story, right? I'm working on this app in my basement for 2 years. I got it launched, and now it's super successful, and I quit my job. Or I started a firm with a friend of mine 20 years ago, and we're doing consulting, and we're doing content creation and all this stuff. All these stories are what makes our little family of independent work so special. And so take some time. If you're traveling home or over the next couple of weeks, think about your story. Think about what makes your business special. What makes people download your app or sign up for your service or listen to your podcast or care about your mission. Because each one of them is special, and there are reasons in each of them to be thankful and to be fortunate. Thank you.